We've got some time, and now's the opportunity to ask Andrew questions. And we'll see if questions come through for Ray, but I reckon they probably will. Can we get a microphone for Ray, please? Scotty's here. If you've got a question, we can go old school. You can tap it through the app, and Scotty will give us some. But if you want to put your hand up and ask questions.
Got the first one here. Ray said mission is just an expression of maturity. Andrew said mission is not as simple as maturing people. Compatible? Go for it.
I'm right and Andrew's wrong.
I think we could both agree that I'm right and you're wrong. That was my first line.
That's probably got to do with what you mean by maturity. So in a way, the ecosystem is really the big M maturity that we're talking about, not the, grow in the knowledge of God and sort of in the more narrower sense. Is one part of that. Would that be right?
Yeah, that's right. I think too often the thing I'm pushing into, and look, an excuse, I'm a preacher, all right, so give me a break. But what I'm pushing into is that we often imagine that if we just preach and pray, it'll all just happen. People will mature as Christians, and that will naturally mean they'll all be on mission and we'll see more converts. That's. I think it's a myth. That's all I'm contending against. I'm not saying, here's the challenge, I'm not saying, therefore don't be about maturing people in the Word. And that's our heartbeat. That's the engine, the foundation, the fountain. I'm not saying, I'm trying to work with the beautiful basics of Christian ministry, but not live with a naivety about that. And that's kind of complex to live in the world of. Do you see this? Is this ringing bells for you, brother?
Yeah. Well, there's so many things to say. Really, your ecosystem, it's probably we haven't had that language, because you come up with really cool names, or steal them from somebody, I don't know where you get. But it's a framework of thinking that we've all seen, whether it's the limitation of just individual witness, say, or exhorting people to preach the gospel from the thing, and you think it's actually not achieving that much effect because it sits on a kind of two-dimensional view of that experience of the community of believers. Yep. And one is, you're right, one is feeding off the other, preaching that lifts the spirits of people to get excited about the wonder of who God is, then impacts meaningful community in my growth group and outside of that. That then, where we're bouncing off each other's stories of how we might have impacted or witnessed to someone at work, which then, it is a complex of things. That means, we want to present someone to Christ who is actually reflecting all those things. And when all those things are reflected, the lovely byproduct even of that is actually a much more healthier missional mindset. Yeah,
good.
So Andrew West, I don't know where you are, you can stand up if you want, so you can own this question. But Andrew West from Church by the Bridge, that's in Kirribilli. Do you intentionally do evangelism through your small groups? And if so, what does that look like? How do you encourage it? Happy for you not to go too long on this one because we've got two more days on this, 3 hours on this.
Yeah. Look, we don't, but you can. We don't for various reasons. It's been a quite intentional, strategic decision. But of course you can, and some churches pursue that path. Some of the reasons we don't are because our growth group structures, by and large, are not working well across the broad measures of things. And part of the reason I think that is because we're asking too much of a growth group leader. We're asking them to not only kind of be over the Word, deep in the Word, leading their people in the Word, but also wanting them to also lead the mission and lead their ministry training and lead them in their whole gamut of... And we're asking so much of people as leaders, they're not actually achieving any of that particularly well. And so what we've decided to do is just ask them to do something less, but do it deeply and well. And so we don't particularly set up small group, growth group structures to be evangelistic. Though we have some growth groups with non-Christians in them, but we're not setting them up for that.
And we're the same. But you can only do that too if you've got a clear missional pathway as well.
Yeah.
And so you're training the congregation Look, let's face it, how many non-believers have gone to a growth group and had their faith damaged rather than helped?
Yeah.
There's a hit and miss element to that I'd like to take a bit more control of that if I can, and have them with people who are much more intentional in that pathway, where they're all witnessing, excited from their growth group, gone out, and then say, right, what would be the next step? I think my next step might be actually your life course for you if I was here. Because I think I'll have confidence that both eyes are on the unbeliever and nurturing them carefully through that early years.
Yep.
And that's just, I think it's about moving away from less hit and miss ministry to much more intentional, thoughtful, that has much more effectiveness in the end, you know? Like
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
resource, wanting to give that person the best, yeah.
Now, someone needs to rip the Band-Aid off, so we've got a number of people who will take questions from the floor. So kind of wave your hand, stand up. I've got another one, though, from the app. Do we just accept that most people aren't competent evangelists? Or should we train, resource and pray expectantly that more of the congregation would be proactively evangelising their friends?
Yes, and yes. There's the thing I'm wrestling with is we want to pursue the ideal and basic Christian ministry, which is that my purpose is to mature everyone in the faith such that they get captured by the heart of God and want to be able to share the reason for the hope that's in them. I want everyone to be doing that. So that's my desire, my longing. I'm working towards it with the resources I have. But I'm not expecting it to happen in reality at this point. And so I've got to work out church life knowing that's not the reality while I pursue it. Does that make sense? I don't want to say face reality, therefore give up on it. But I want to face reality while I'm pursuing it.
And your view of preaching involves training, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it depends what people hear by training. Do they mean a 6-week course? You're not a 6-week course kind of guy, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Would that be right?
Well, we do it. I mean, what I was trying to say was we do use coursework, and I think a lot of the Matthias stuff is excellent for all of this kind of thing, as you mentioned earlier. But it's not like we think that's the key. That's
right.
And the reality is the effective fall off out of those things is not as high as you'd hope they would be. You've got to actually make the whole system work so that sits in as a piece of it.
Yeah, that's where our 9-word challenge is really an attempt at wanting to do that holistically, but we're not putting all our eggs in the basket.
See, I think it's excellent. See, we would take that on. We would do the 9-week challenge, but it would work because we built all of our systems to make that actually get traction. If you just turn up one week and say, we're going to do this thing, it'll go nowhere. Yeah.
A number of people asking questions about the follow-up process. What does it look like? You talked about a 10-step follow-up process. Is the next step conversion? What does it look like?
Well, for us, like with Ray's saying, there's lots of different pathways. So people get converted in church just coming to church. We get people sitting through week, they come along and week on, week out, they're hearing the scriptures opened up and their lives are changed and conversion happens. But we have intentional pathways as well. And one of the main ones is through an evangelistic course that we run, 9-10 times a year or something like this. And then out of that, people choose to go into follow-up, which is we call it More to Life, though I always wanted the name Afterlife. But anyway, so you can go into Afterlife, but no one liked that. But anyway, so they move into More to Life, and they go into small groups that kind of all gather together here in the foyer. And, there's dozens of people come into More to Life, and they'll have a leader in a More to Life group that will walk them through a 10-week follow-up program that then transitions into small group life in church.
Ray, you said that most people newcomers come via a Sunday service with someone that they know they have a relationship with. And Herdy, you said that reality is we have limited resources, limited time, money, people. I want to ask you to share anecdotally on door knocking. Do you think, because it's a very expensive, in terms of time and people, very expensive thing to do, is it worth it?
Well, we've had lots of shots at it, and Heather has an extremely low success rate to it. So I kind of see it as there's always a group that want to go out, and I love it. And I think it's a good training tool. But it's not we've not actually seen, and it could be the way our guys have done it, but the times we've done it, it's actually not borne much fruit. So for us, it's not been, I've done all sorts of things. I've gone to the markets because there were lots of Maltese there at 4 a.m, tried to evangelise them. Heroic but ineffective. And so always saying, I just keep evaluating. It just may not be, it may work in your particular context.
Yeah,
If there's no other option, that's what I'm going to do. If I've got other options that I think bear more fruit, I will do that. So for us, it's, if someone wanted to, have a group of people go door knocking, and they did. We planned at the 4 o'clock service. There was a team from there that actually wanted to, they were evangelising, but they were really kind of letting people know there's a new service starting. That was excellent, and I think we got someone coming from that. But that's the exception rather than the rule for us.
Yeah, I tend to think of evangelism, you're looking for opals underground, and there's 2 ways you can opal mine. There's drill a shaft and hope you hit the seam and work the seam, or you can do open cut mining to find the seams more quickly. And if I might offer, the senior minister who's starting a church, 40, 30 people in a suburb, and thinks the answer is to become the coach of the local soccer team to meet all the families to grow the church, is digging a mine to find an opal, which he might hit, but unlikely, and he'll spend a lot of hours. But if you can work out a way to actually mobilise your church to do broadcast evangelism, there's a lot of low fruit out there. There's a lot of people, Al mentioned earlier, the loneliness, blah, blah, blah. There are a lot of people sitting in houses around our suburbs who actually have something going on, the kind of prevenient grace of God moving there, and we just need to find them. And if you do opal by doing a trench, you might not. We've seen lots of wonderful things where, a girl's converted, and then her mother comes to church, and then her brother comes to church, and then the uncle, and we've seen incredible seams work like that. But when you do broadcast, you actually find the low fruit. Now, sometimes we do door knocking every year in January, but that's because it's part of a larger mission program through late December, January, so that we actually get greater wins out of it, because it's not just will you think about becoming a Christian, it's part of your church. As you open the church, you've actually got another step that's easy for people to connect into. So we actually get more response through that. We get people coming to church through those processes. But finding a way to get, I think for church plants particularly, the key for church planting is to find ways to get profile that is punching way above your weight, so that you find the low fruit. I think that's crucial.
We've got 2 days on this, so these are really good questions. This last one though, what's the biggest weakness of your own church's evangelism efforts that you've learnt from? And very brief, 20 seconds, because we've got 2 days
To talk about our weaknesses.
There's so many things. Me. I think not appreciating pathway concepts, I think that's, and then maintain. You can start things too, but if you don't maintain them, the teams aren't being cared for, nurtured, have their vision cast for what they're doing, why they're doing it, and then it just falls off, and so keeping that on track, yeah.
And I think for us, it's early on, just doing something without sufficient around it. So you feel good because you're doing it, but you haven't got enough around it to actually make it really work, and so it was heroic, but it didn't actually have effect. So I think for us, the big lessons have been paying attention to a whole movement through a calendar and a year to make these things work more effectively.